Welcome to the new edition of the ABBA League magazine. The regular part of the 13th season is now behind us. A lot of final decisions were on the table about the pairings at the Final Four tournament, Eurocup tickets and the relegation battle. There was a derby on show in Zagreb between Cibona and Crvena Zvezda. Zadar was trying to avoid relegation in the game against Olimpija, and Široki was trying to do the same in a game against Igor Keja. You'll get to know Bogdan Bogdanovic a little better, and of course in the end the best 5 actions of the round. Start with the news. Partizan sport guy Terence Kinsey was having additional scans of his injured ankle in the USA, from where the news came that the season for him is effectively over. But the Partizan camp is reluctant to believe the news and expect a player to return to Belgrade as soon as possible. Season is also over for Široki's Ivan Opačak, who is now unable to help his team due to the injury to his Achilles tendon. Budućnost has decided to cut costs before the start of the national championship, and as a result they have parted ways with William Coleman. The American has signed a new contract with Rabotnički Skopje. We start in Novo Mesto. Krka still had theoretical chances of securing European places before the game against the 12th placed Solnock, for whom it was probably the last game in this league. Krka had some injury trouble as they were only deploying 9 players for this matchup. Zvonko Buljan was the one who opened the scoring with a 3, and for the guests it was Justin Holiday. Krka was leading by 12-9 when Matej Rojc scored twice in a row, but had then stopped almost completely, after which the Hungarians scored the next 12 points, 7 of which were contributed by Strahinja Milošević. When David Vojvoda scored the visitors' first 3-pointer, the lead was already in double digits. Erion Castrati was the last one to score in the first period. He dunked really nicely to make it 26-18. In the second quarter, Akos Keller was troubling Krka the most. After this dunk, the score was 32-22. Then Zvonko Buljan overreacted over the refereeing decision about him traveling and was making an insulting gesture for which he was expelled from the game. The visitors readily punished this and were leading by 18 points by the time Miljan Rakic scored Solnock's 6th 3-pointer. 48-32 after the first half, in which Krka couldn't be pleased with their defensive performance, as well as 11 turnovers in that period. But then the home offensive started in the third quarter as Krka scored the first 13 points, 7 of which came from Jaka Klobuchar, who closed the gap to just 3 points. Then a couple of scoreless minutes followed, after which Chris Booker scored to close the gap to just a point. The home team raised their defensive performance, the evidence provided by Luka Lapornik, who managed to block Rakic's attempt. Still, Solnock managed to score 2 consecutive 3-pointers and get back to a 9-point lead. The lead was 7 points come the end of the half. It was 59-52. When the visitors were leading by 61-55, Krka launched one final offensive. Jasmin Hukic scored twice in a row to equal the score to 61. And then the first lead after a very long time for the home team, as Castrati was successful. Then another 2 successful 3-point shots from Krka, and the home team was now leading by 6. That was a little over 3 minutes before the end. And the great turnaround was rounded up by Hukic when he scored another 3 to make it 72-65, 73-67 in the end, as Krka outscored their opponent in the second half by 41-19. MZT needed a win over Radnički to be sure of qualifying for the Eurocup, as well as wanting to finish the home season with a win. Also, it was Todor Gečovski's last game in his career. Kate Davis was the first one to score. And for the visitors at the other end, it was Stefan Birčević. He was also the one who scored for the first slightly bigger advantage when he made it 14-7. MZT then replied with 7 consecutive points, and when Todor Gečovski scored, the home team had equalized to 14. Uroš Lučić was the last one to score in the first period, which finished with 20-17. Aleksandar Kostovski then scored for 3 to give MZT their highest lead of 6 points, but then Radnički scored 4 3-pointers in less than 2 minutes, which gave the visitors a 12-2 partial, after which they had taken the lead by 29-25. Then Radnički combined really well with Birčević dunking. Stefan Balmazovic then set the result of the first half of 43-38 with a 7th Radnički 3-pointer. Savalicic was the first one to score in the second half to give Radnički a 7-point lead. And that was followed by an exotic 3 from Nikola Kalinic, which came off the glass. Then Savalicic scored for 3 and the lead had grown to 12 points. After that, Marko Brkic stepped in line for the next 3, and it was Radnički's 11th from only 18 attempts, and the guests were in front by 16 points. At the end of the third quarter, Lesic scored twice to set the result after 30 minutes of play. It was 71-53. Marko Marinovic produced as many as 18 assists in this game. This was one of them for Dusan Mlađan, and a new 3-pointer for Radnički, after which they led by 19. It was in the 32nd minute of the game. Sead Čehović closed the gap slightly, but really to no avail, as the home defense was simply too leaky, and Radnički was able to maintain their lead until the last minute, when Aleksandar Kostovski managed to cut the deficit to 7 points, but that was only 20 seconds before time, which ran out of Macedonian champion, who eventually lost the game by 95-87. Cibona was still in it with a chance of claiming third spot when they hosted the leading team of the league in front of a capacity crowd. Darko Planinic was the first one to score, and in the other end it was the tallest player of the league, Boban Marjanovic. Cibona with a good start, as Planinic made it 13-7, which forced the visiting coach to take an early timeout. When Jarell Blessingame scored his third 3-pointer, Cibona was in front by 20-13. First quarter ended with Dario Šarić scoring and making it 27-22. Marko Jagodić-Kuriđa rounded up a 9-0 run, and Cibona had a double-digit lead for the first time in the game. Marko Simonovic then drove through exceptionally well, as he managed to dunk over 2 players, but that was followed by Siriščević's second 3-pointer, and Cibona was in front by 12 points. Then Jaka Blažić scored twice in a row to set the result of the first half. It was 43-35. Marko Jagodić-Kuriđa then scored over Marjanovic to equal Cibona's highest lead of 12 points, but Zvezda replied with 7 consecutive points to close the gap to 5. 57-51 was the result after 30 minutes of play. Cibona was in front by 10 points when Planinic scored, but then the game turned upside down as Charles Jenkins scored 2 consecutive 3-pointers to give Crvena Zvezda the lead, a first one since the start of the match. When Jaka Blažić managed to beat the buzzer, Zvezda led by 8 points just 2 minutes before the end. The Marcus Nelson then rounded up a 20-0 run from the visitors, and the game was effectively over as Cibona couldn't score for more than 6 minutes. That, of course, means these two teams will play the semi-final at the Final Four tournament, the first one at the 24th of April. Two teams from Bosnia and Herzegovina met in Laktaši, where Igokea needed to win over Široki to secure their place in the Eurocup. Of course, Široki was desperate for the win, which would keep them in the competition for the next season. It was also a reprise of the final of the Bosnian Cup, in which Široki won. It was the home team to score first through Duško Bunić, and for the visitors it was Robert Drikić. It wasn't much of a first period, which ended with 14-13, with Uroš Nikolić the last one to score in it. Igokea was leading by 7 points when Duško Bunić scored, and it was after a 12-2 run from the home team. But the gap was soon just a point as Jamar Young was successful for 3. The result after 20 minutes was set by Nemanja Gordić when he made it 31-28. Široki then opened the second half well as they took the lead of 38-36. This is the action which gave the visitors one slight lead. Igokea managed to score for 3 in their 6th attempt, but it was to give the home team the lead back, courtesy of Nemanja Gordić. That was also the start of another good run from Igokea, 12-2, after which they led by 8 points, and after Gajevic's effort, Ivan Velić was forced to request a timeout. The last 5 points of the quarter were scored by Teddy Gibson, and the home team had a double-digit lead for the first time in the game. They were already 14 points to the good when Gajovic scored again, and a bit later the lead had grown to 16 points when Teddy Gibson was successful again. Then Jamar Young scored 5 points in a row, and with his 3 the gap was reduced to 8 points little over 3 minutes before time. The winner was decided in the last minute when Nemanja Gordic scored both free throws. The end result of 69-60 was set by Bunic, and with this win Igokea is guaranteed to feature in the Eurocup, while Shiroki waves the league goodbye for at least 1 year. The last-placed Zadar was in dire need of a win which could help them keep the placing in the league, and it needed to be against Union Olympia, which was still harboring some hopes of reaching 7th place, albeit theoretical. Alen Omic was the first one to score, and for the home team it was their captain, Ive Ivano. Alen Omic was quite unstoppable and already had 10 points to his name when he made it 14-12. At the end of the quarter, Alex Stevenson scored twice, and the team from Ljubljana ended it with a 7-point lead. Zadar was only trailing by 2 when Toni Prostan scored and drew a foul as well, and that was the opening of a much better display from the home team. Andrew Lawrence then scored 3 times for 3, and Zadar took the lead of 35-29, that after a 13-2 partial. It was 39-37 after the first half, set by Omic, who by then already had 15 points to his name. Josip Sobin was probably the man of the match, eventually reaching 14 points and 12 rebounds. He was responsible for Zadar's highest lead thus far of 8 points. But Olympia wasn't just going to roll over, as Salin scored his 4th three-pointer to close the gap to just 2 points. That was followed by another good Zadar run as they raced away to a 9-point lead courtesy of Andrew Lawrence. 64-57 was the result after 3 quarters of play. But Olympia was soon near again as Gailius scored his 2nd three-pointer, but then they couldn't get any closer as Schutalo at the other end made sure Zadar was again leading by 9. The gap was then closed back to 3 points just 2 minutes before time when Gailius was again successful from the 3-point line. Then Salin had a chance to level the score just 30 seconds before the end, but he missed. 27 seconds before time, Ive Ivano scored both free throws to put it to 77-72. Dino Muric did the same at the other end, after which Mark Lyons missed both on the other side. And in a game of free throws, Jakov Vladovic was only half successful when he made it 77-75. Somehow Ivano managed to also miss both for Zadar, which gave the visitors a chance to win, providing Dino Muric scored for free, which he didn't, and Zadar was able to celebrate their survival by a scrap of the hair as the crowd learned Shiroki had lost against Igokea. Mega Vizura had been safe for quite some time in the league and was even a candidate for the Eurocup places in the previous round, but the results in other courts didn't go their way, so previous to this match all hopes of reaching European qualification were extinguished. Still, they wanted to end the season on a high. Budućnost was the first one to score through Aleksa Popovic, and at the other end it was Ratko Varda, the oldest player of the league. Budućnost was already in front by 8 points when Mihailovic scored for 3, and when Aleksa Popovic did the same, the Montenegrin champion was in front by 9. Popovic was then successful from the counter-attack, and Budućnost can open up a 13-point lead, and that was exactly the margin come at the end of the first period when Ivanovic scored. Nenad Miljanovic was quick off the blocks in the second one as he scored the first 5 points and forced the visiting coach to take a timeout. Nikola Jokic then closed the gap to 6 points as Budućnost needed over 3 minutes to get going when Popovic scored his 12th point already. He eventually finished the game with record-breaking 24 points. Čedomir Vitkovac then dunked to give the visitors a 7-point lead, but that didn't last long as Ratko Varda was able to close the gap to just a point, and 42-41 was the result of the first half. Budućnost then started the third period well as they scored the first 10 points, a run rounded up by Mihajlovic with a 3. Mega needed more than 5 minutes to score, with Nikola Jokic putting it to 51-43. Then Vladimir Mihajlovic scored 3 times for 3 and the visitors were again leading by 12. Still, Mega was able to cut the deficit to 4 points after they themselves forged an 8-0 run. The teams were even equal when Novica Veličković scored in the last second of the period, which ended level on points on 62. In the 33rd minute, Nikola Jokic made sure the home team was leading for the first time in the game. 2.5 minutes before time, Vasilija Micic scored to give Mega their highest lead thus far of 6 points. The gap was close to 3 points when Nikola Ivanovic scored a minute before the end, but the home team replied with the same measures when Nemanja Dangubić was successful. But Ivanovic scored again for 3 at the other end, and Budućnost was again trailing for just 3 points. 22 seconds before time, Jovovic's assistant was expelled from the game, and Ratko Varda was able to increase the lead to 4 points, after which Mega had lost the ball and Ivanovic closed it to 2. Nenad Miljanovic then scored 12 seconds before time. The end result was 92-86. It was set by Nemanja Dangubić. A win for Mega Vizura in the last game of the season. 5,500 people turn up in the Pioneer Hall to see their team fight it out with their eventual opponent in the coming F4 tournament, Cedevita. The duel had no final effect on how the tournament placing would unfold. Davis Bertans was the first one to score, and it was for far indeed. At the other end, it was Nolan Smith who would eventually finish the game with 13 points. Then Partizan forged a 10-0 run finished by Geoffrey Lovern, setting the result of the first quarter 20-14. Bogdan Bogdanovic scored for 3 at the beginning of the second, thus equaling Partizan's highest lead of 9 points. That was replied with the same measures at the other end when Marino Baždarić was successful. When Cedevita closed the gap to just 3 points, it was time for Sasha Pavlovic to shine. First this alley-oop to make it 26-21, and in the same minute another nice piece of play by Pavlovic who made it 30-21. When he made it 34-21, it was after another 10-0 run, and a while later it was Bogdan Bogdanovic who was successful. But Partizan was 13 points to the good also when the first half finished. It took more than 2 minutes to get the teams going in the second half, and when they did, it was Milutino who increased the lead to 15, after which Milenko Tepic dunked nicely to make it 49-37. Then it was Milutino's turn to dunk over Miro Bilan. He got replied at the other end when Yusuf Nurkic dunked heavily after Smith's pass. 61-45 after 3 quarters of play, and a new highest lead for Partizan. Sasha Pavlovic was the first one to score in the last period, and the lead had grown to 18 points, after which Marino Baždarić managed to cut the deficit to 13. Four minutes before time, Yusuf Nurkic scored, closing it to 11 points, and then Zubcic to 10 points, but with only a minute and a half remaining on the clock. The end result of 77-68 was set by Mihailo Andrić, and that was the end of the game, which will be repeated in the second semi-final of the Final Four tournament. And now let's get to know Bogdan Bogdanovic a little better, as our team paid him a visit. Bogdan Bogdanovic is having a great season in a black and white shirt. He literally exploded on both scenes, the ABA League and the EuroLeague as well. What are the reasons for it? I was practicing hard, just like last year in my first senior year. The only difference is that all the hard work is now paying off. I can't say I'm too surprised over my development. I was expecting and wishing for it just like any other young player, and it's paying off now. The breakthrough was easier under the guidance of a well-known expert, Partizan's coach Duško Vujošević. For sure, he's one of the best coaches in the region and wider. It's not usual young players get the chance to prove themselves in the EuroLeague. There are such teams in the ABA League, but they're usually not in the chase for top positions, and the pressure is less. It's a different story when you get the chance in a big club like Partizan, and when you do, you have to deal with the pressure of winning trophies. It's not clear what kind of success Partizan will be able to achieve this season, but it's certain the black and white are not as convincing as in the previous years. Well, the competition has advanced as well, and it is hard to stay at the top anyway. It also isn't easy to win things, and to be serial winners is even harder. It's an additional pressure in this season. The league is also stronger, and that's the reason. Bogdanovic also thinks the Final Four tournament will be the toughest ever for all the teams coming from the ex-Yugoslavia territory. Well, we all know what happened to Igokea last year when they, as a leading team from the regular season, were playing supposedly the weakest of the four, namely our team, who eventually finished first. It's hard to evaluate other teams in the tournament. You never know what will happen, how things will unfold in the semi-final. But the final is, of course, a different story. There are other factors deciding the winner, maybe even who wants it more. What kind of dreams was he having as a child growing up? Did he also have an idol in the game of basketball? Yes, I did have one, and it is my president, Predrag Danilovic. He was one of my favorite players, even though I have never seen him play as I was too young. I can also say that I admired Dejan Bodiroga and Sasha Djordjevic. But if you ask me whose career impressed me the most, I would have to say it was Peja Stojakovic's. In this regard, he is my favorite player. Will he reach similar glory remains to be seen, but this nice guy from Belgrade is for sure on the right path. For now, he remains a potential star player. So let's take a look at the results. A big turnaround in Novo Mesto as Krka managed to beat Solnok. A surprise win for Radnički in Skopje. Crvena Zvezda fought hard to win in Zagreb, and Zadar managed to win not only the game against Olimpija, but also the survival in the league. No change in the first 5 places in the league. Igokea finishing 6th and Krka 7th. MZT falling as many as 3 places to finish 9th in the end, and Široki is in last place, which of course means they are out of the league for the next season. Nenad Miljenovic is the last MVP of the regular season. He managed a playing index of 31. He scored 17 points, had 5 rebounds and as many as 8 assists in the 29 minutes he played against Budućnost. And now for the best 5 actions of the round. At number 5 we have this Nurkic's dump after a Smith assist. At number 4 we have an alley-oop coming from Solnoki, courtesy of Ákos Keller. At number 3 we have a blocked shot. It was Miro Bilan blocking Sasha Paulovic. But we do have Sasha Paulovic at number 2 with this dunking from when he drove through. And at number 1, we have Edion Kastrati from Krka. He drove through, dunked over Marton Bader and Strahinja Milošević. And so we have 2 Serbo-Croatian pairings in the semi-final of the Final Four. From 24th to 27th of April, the games will be held in the Belgrade Arena. And this is all for today. Our show will take a break now for 3 weeks, after which we will have all the coverage from the Final Four tournament from Belgrade. Join us then. Bye-bye.